what are the steps, the incremental steps you take to examine your strategy before you actually even launch a strategy?
I mean, you have to know your consumer.
The consumer, who
Yeah,
is your audience?
yeah, who are you selling to? Like, I think that's the fundamental of anything you do, right? You have to understand what's your target, where are you going, where's the North Star. When you understand that, when you're understanding your product and how people think about your product, or how you want people to think about your product, or what do they care about and desire, then you could start laying out a plan on how to make sure that you could address that gap or that value, right? Because there's a value that the consumer wants, and you have to figure that out and create that proposition, and then everything kind of falls into place.
This may be a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway for those that may not have the answer. You said you have to know who your consumer is, who your target audience is. How do you ascertain that? How do you figure that out?
I mean, in my career, I've always been very attuned to what's going on in the world, right? I'm a culturalist in nature. Like, I'm more of an anthropologist. I like to understand, right? There's like that psychological kind of aspect of how I looked at the world since I was a little kid. You know, I grew up in Harlem, where I was like the only Latin dude, you know, in a predominantly African American neighborhood. So I was very, I guess, insular and thinking and exploring and understanding what's going on. And I think that has transcended through my career and how I deal with people. And as a marketer, it became an actual asset for me. So I think it's just innate in certain people. And I think people of color actually are even more innate to it, because they're always examining their culture and their environment and how they approach it, right? So I think we're natural, marketers in that sense. But you have to understand your consumer, understand what really drives them. You have to understand your own needs, right? After that, you do research. You have to justify, or you have to qualify if your assumptions are right.
How do you go about that research, and how do you go about that justification, that vetting process? What are some of the basic tools, resources, websites? What do you do?
I mean, the easiest way of doing it is just asking the question, right? Like, when somebody grabs your product, your material, or whatever, is like, why do you like it? How did you hear about it? What about it makes you feel good? And just start honing in and always asking that question to everybody you do it. I mean, there's that one-to-one relationship, but then it's also about, starting a dialogue with them, through social media. You could also do some surveys. There's so many tools now to get information. But when I think about my career in the past, and when I was part of this team of young guys coming out of college, and we started a hip hop magazine. What
was the name? Just plug it.
It was Stress Magazine. Stress Magazine at the time. I remember, we just put stuff that we cared about, and we knew there was a void there, and we knew that we loved, urban music and that the culture behind it, and we wanted to tell that story for the public. We knew that there was a demand because we wanted it, and we couldn't find that, and we built it. But what really made it work was, people started to write to us across the country,
okay.
And they were asking for more of stories on graffiti, or they wanted to get a deeper look at what was going on in Brooklyn, the music scene. They wanted to go into Puerto Rico and this whole and that helped us understand what the consumer wanted, and that kind of built momentum,
So it sounds to me like early on you realized that engaging your audience, being in dialogue with your potential consumer was very valuable data and information to understand your brand, whether you were delivering on that value proposition, and what was missing, right?
Exactly.
Engagement. Right. So let me ask you this. Now, clearly you're no longer kind of in the weeds of this stuff. You've, amassed a lot of success and done bigger and better things, but like, for those of us at home with a laptop and, a Wi-Fi connection, and you mentioned surveys and data, are there particular websites or programs you'd say, hey, this is worth investing some time reading, this is worth investing some time buying, to utilize that as a marketing tool, as a research tool?
I think the biggest marketing tool you guys people have is social media, right? Like, I'll give an example of my wife. She actually started a blog on spirituality, and she's evolving that not because only of her kind of thought process, but what the community is asking of her, right? And that's actually creating kind of where the path of her brand is going. I think a lot of people have those tools now, and that's why there's so many micro influencers kind of doing that space.
Interesting.
So that, I think you start there. The other thing is, there's tons of tools out there like Monkey Survey. Yeah,
Okay.
that you can just go on, type it up and pay a little fee, and you can survey the people that are already interacting with you, or you want to have a specific question to that. But honestly, it's really, social media is really the thing. You pose a question, you put a question up there, and people will get back to you.
Okay, fair enough. So we've talked a little bit about kind of like the basics